Welcome to this week's episode, From Data Dust to Gold. In this episode, Jeff and Erin are joined by special guest Mark Hummel to discuss how to transform your overlooked data into a competitive advantage and why your best differentiation story is already hiding in your system.
Your competitive differentiation is not the number of resumes that you have in your database. It's the actual knowledge that you have about that candidate. That's why you pay recruiters, and that's why you don't just pay a job.
Highly Adaptive is a podcast where staffing and consulting leaders learn to outpace change. Hosted by Jeff Pelliccio and Erin MacKenzie, they'll cut through the noise to bring you practical moves you could use right now to grow, adapt, and lead. In today's business landscape, every click, email, and digital action leaves a trail. We're drowning in data from our CRMs to our ATS, website analytics, automation tools, the list goes on. But here's the million-dollar question. Is all that data actually useful, or is it just digital dust collecting in your servers? Well, today, we've got just the person to help us get to the bottom of that very question.
So, you guys, I get to introduce longtime friend, Mark. It's going back like many, many, many years, but you guys, you know him by Mark Hummel. I think it's like it is definitely a first name, last name that we have here. And Mark is the founder of Toro Insights. Truly, he is one of the staffing industry's sharpest minds when it comes to data strategy. Mark knows I call him all the time. And he's honestly helped dozens of firms transform their scattered information into competitive advantage, like over and over. And this isn't just through complex systems. Like, he has clarity and purpose and really dives into making sure that he's also listening to that client. So Mark, we are incredibly excited to have you here and can't wait to dive in.
Oh, so pumped to be on. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I did all my homework, researching the your previous podcast here, and I'm really pumped to dive into this conversation with the two of you who have certainly been a part of much of the last 16 years of me being in the staffing industry. So that's why I love this industry. The places might change for us, but the faces stay the same.
Totally agree. And you're dating us here now, Mark, because it's been a long time.
Oh, yeah. Me and you, that's go back to the Fire e-recruit days, right? So it's way back there, yeah?
Many, many, many eons ago. But so we always like to kind of start with like a personal story. And I know, Mark, we were recently chatting about the fact, for those of you that don't know, Mark has drones. And he likes to fly his drones.
Is it multiple drones, or you have a drone? Like, how fanatical are we on the drone?
Yeah, I mean, when you get into the drone life, you start with one, and then you just see features. It's like getting a new iPhone, except for the difference is you don't throw away or trade in your old drone, right? So there's a few in the closet, which is, I think, understandable, right? So
drones plural.
My plural was accurate. But Mark, what happened recently while your son was with you? You need to tell the story of how there might have been a little bit of a police run-in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, my parents always knew that there would be a police run-in somewhere in my life. I don't know that they knew it was going to be for a drone incident. But fun fact, you cannot fly drones over top of cruise ships or, general ports in the United States, apparently. I was not aware of this. Now, Jeff and I were chatting about this too. You do get a warning that pops up on the, on the controller there, but I thought that was because I was maybe too close to NASA. We're down here in Florida on the Space Coast. So I was, innocently approaching the NASA line, assuming that I had plenty of clearance. And I was getting some great shots. People were enjoying the vacation on the cruise ship. But then all of a sudden, some lights come flaring down the street. And he was rather irate. And apparently it's a pretty big deal to fly over a national port. So lesson learned there. And when we got to the point where we were kind of cool with each other and realized I wasn't getting put in the back of his squad car in front of my son on our trip to the beach, I asked him, how did you know where to come find me? And Jeff, I don't know if you know this, but when you push that consent button, you are letting them know this is where my controller is, which is where the pilot of this drone is taking off from. And apparently, when it's over a bad spot, they just send that out to anybody who needs to track you down. So, lessons learned.
I always wondered, because it's two consents. Wow. It's not just one. You get, hey, listen, this is probably not where you should be flying. Are you okay with it? And you hit yes. And then it says, no, but seriously, this is not where you should be flying. And you have to hit it twice before you can launch. So this is a good lesson for me to learn.
At the end of the day, lessons learned, and then also great pictures of, the new Disney ship that was leaving the port. So, I think all in all, worth it, right?
Did he make you delete your pictures, or did you get to keep your images?
Yeah, he did ask, like, are you going to delete those? But the police officer wasn't overly technical. So there was not a lot of, like, let me walk you through the fact that I actually deleted them. There was no confirmation. So maybe I shouldn't post them, but if you guys want to see them later, I'll shoot them your way.
I love it.
But this is probably the best segue that we could have not planned for, to be honest. Because listen, as a fellow drone, whatever it's called, there is lots of video footage that just never gets edited. And so it's almost like all the data that we all cram into every single system that we have that we don't use. So in this sort of world of digital dust, like, can you kind of paint a picture for us? Like, let's bring this into topic itself. Like, what does this actually look like inside of staffing firms today?
Yeah, I think it's one of the craziest things that we've all experienced and as an industry know is happening. But for those last 16 years, 8 of those were spent with Bullhorn, where I was getting put in the room with, every size client in the industry. And the number one thing that was said in every meeting, no matter what the meeting was about, is if it doesn't make its way into the ATS or CRM, then it didn't happen, right? So we're teaching these teams to document everything, to put everything into the system of record, the source of truth, as we call it. The challenge with that is, most of that data is never used. So to your point on the drone footage, there is a ton of data that we all have told everybody is incredibly important to collect that we don't do anything with. And then there's a bunch of data that when you do use it, it is incredibly cumbersome to use that data. And it's actually slowing people down more than it's speeding them up in a lot of cases. And so it's, one of the biggest things in staffing is your competitive differentiation is not the number of resumes that you have in your database. It's the actual knowledge that you have about that candidate. That's why you pay recruiters. And that's why you don't just pay a job board, is you go out and you find additional pieces of information that your competition doesn't know about these candidates, about these clients. And that's your competitive advantage. But we're not using that in a lot of staffing firms. We, rely on how many candidates do we have with a resume, not how many candidates do we actually have, useful data points on, because nobody knows that.
You're still counting the classic count. It's the classic count versus like the more modern count, right? So like we have 1 million resumes in our database, but it means nothing if you can't actually articulate or segment properly what that is. How bad has this all gotten? Like, because look, in the last, so I've been in the industry now for 13 years ish. And so I got to see like kind of the emergence of technology in the space. And then it just became so not invasive, but like it became so grand that you didn't have an opportunity to kind of like adjust to the learning curve. So how bad has this gotten?
Our systems were never designed for the amount of data that we're now putting in them. And one of the best, ways to prove that is you look at pretty much any of the ATSs on the market right now. When you go to notes for an entity, whether that be candidate, company, whatever, you're typically looking at them at a max 20 at a time on a page. And the reason that was always the design is because they never expected you to have hundreds upon hundreds of data points for these candidates. And now, because we've done such a great job of asking everybody to put everything into the system, you've got, text messages going in there where each back and forth text message is another note that gets added to a candidate's record. That's just a microcosm of the overall, again, collection of data has gotten, you can say that it's gotten really bad by the fact that there's a lot of data that isn't being used, but we have the opportunity to make it really good right now, which is what's the most exciting part. Is I think we're really starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel that's going to cause us to probably even start hoarding more data at this point.
You kind of hit it. It's true. Like everyone is hoarding this data, and it's honestly, it's just sitting there. I imagine like our ATSs or our agencies are kind of like border collies. Like if you guys can think about this, and we're like herding all the data, and it's just sitting here in this pen, and we're doing nothing with it. But like Mark, with all of the like hoarding, what's this costing like the client? Because there's got to be like a massive impact to them and it's probably hurting their business by not doing anything with as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different areas that strike me as impactful in a negative way for them. We all jump to the financial from a storage cost. Thankfully, isn't that big of a deal because most of these ATSs, CRMs are kind of capping at least us mid-sized players at how much they're going to charge for any additional data. But think about the BI investment that you make that you probably underutilize because, again, to Jeff's point earlier, you still don't have that data segmented to actually report on it. The biggest one being your automation. Everybody, I think we've said it for the last 6 years, everybody should have an automation strategy. The challenge with automation is you have to be able to segment and know your user base that you're wanting to do any type of messaging or automation around. And when you don't have data in the right place, in the right format, you're basically wasting an investment in that automation tool. But I think the biggest piece, the piece that's unquantifiable and probably scary if you could quantify, is the analysis paralysis that happens because there is so much data. We are really big. We did this in the fire days and we did it when we started Toro. You have to do the chair sides and not just get the 30,000 foot view. We have to know what the users are doing. And when we sit with those users and watch a recruiter take an hour in the morning to put together their tear sheet, that's an hour every day. However many 345 days a year that they're working, that has to happen because they have to know who to call. The sales team who looks at, redoes their customer list every morning to decide who they want to reach out to, who they want to call. They're doing it by reading note by note, or they're just gripping it and ripping it. They can make the phone call and figure it out as they get somebody on. But either one of those is a bad outcome compared to what it could be with all the data that we have right now.
And you're talking about the things that are like the actual on-roll tasks. Like you're not even talking about the predictive analytics, which is keeping you from actually strategizing for your organization to earn more money or to leverage the potential or the opportunity that's in front of you. So what about that? In all the clients that you've supported and helped, what portion of your work actually positions or strengthens their strategic kind of methodology?
Again, the timing couldn't be better because the writing is now on the wall. It's put right in front of us. Everybody wants to do something with AI. Everybody's got dollars earmarked for AI. Even as we have an industry that's now, hopefully, knock on wood, going on the path to recovery, as people were trimming teams, they still had dollars set aside for AI. And the first thing that you have to do, as you guys both know really well, is figure out what business problems you're trying to solve. So, okay, you start to look at the business problems you can probably get from your BI reports. I know I need more jobs. I know I need to be better at sales to get, more accounts, whatever the case is. Then the next question is the one that really, I think, hits home for people is, okay, what in your process is broken or inefficient that we need to focus on? And that's the data that's in the details. That's the data that, for you to really know that, you can go ask any of your team members what's challenging, what's rough. You'll get a different answer from every one of them. And they don't know what they don't know. But if you look into the data, you can start to see and start to predict, here's the things that are slowing us down. Here's the things I need to look out for in the future in a process. Here's the things that I know from the last time I was successful at this task that I can now go implement to be successful at it again. Those predictive analytics that not just tell you where you can be more efficient, but where you can go grow your revenue, those are hidden in the details. That's not in your, what we today look at in structured data through BI reports, unfortunately.
And is that something that you're working with? Like you were talking about the chair sides, which I'm a huge believer of chair sides. And you recently put out a post, a LinkedIn post, and it got a lot of traction because we were all talking about what's like the value of the chair side. It can help uncover where the gaps are, as you just described. It can also help with like adoption and getting through everything. But like when you're thinking about this, and when you're going in to chat with some of these leaders, is that where you're starting? Are you getting them to do chair sides themselves, or are you guys doing the chair side so you can help drive, here's your gaps, here's your needs?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is, and I always love that there's a lot of leaders in this industry that came up through the ranks too. So they've had some of that experience, firsthand. And sometimes you just need to trigger their PTSD when you're in the room with them, and they'll remember that process very well, very quickly. But the other problem, or the other thing that we look at is, you have to do this in a way that scales, because you can't just we know we can't share a side with every single customer because, knock on wood, we've been growing so fast. We can't, be in an office for every one of them. But what we can do is start to look through that, digital dust that they're collecting and start to use AI, which eventually is, the product that we're selling them. But we do, AI data analysis to start every one of our relationships with our current customers, where we, again, kind of put our digital intelligence engine over top of their data set and start to look for some of those things. And we do that because we want to understand, how much of that data is trapped in areas where they're never looking at it. And how does that inform their process, which tells us whether there's a reason for us to, continue having those conversations, or whether, maybe they're on a great path and they want to look for, something more. They already have the solution in mind that they need to utilize.
What is like the most commonly overlooked like data chunks? You know what I'm saying? Like we already said, like, listen, classic people are looking at obviously like the rudimentary metrics or looking at the raw counts of things. But if we were to kind of look back, or if you were to kind of take that like 10,000 foot view and look at all the organizations that you helped, like what are the pieces of data that the vast majority of organizations have access to almost regardless of their ATS that they just don't ever focus on? That is a huge value or a missed value.
Yeah, I think it's the back and forth between the customer, whether that customer be a company that you're trying to sell staffing services to or a candidate. It's the back and forth between your team and that individual, because every company right now is capturing emails that they have back and forth with these hiring managers. Every company is capturing text messages that their recruiters are having with their candidates. And we look on the professional side, it's really starting to show us that more and more customers should be capturing every LinkedIn conversation, because now with the LinkedIn connection, we're starting to see a lot of that show up in ATSs. And what all that shows us is, think about the insights that you can look at scale. What's been successful in getting a candidate to engage with you? What's been successful in getting a hiring manager to engage with you? What are the stories of success that you can share with them to help them kind of get that, FOMO or trust in your services and why you differentiate yourself? And that's always my biggest question, especially since there's been a lot of focus on the sales side here as of late. Is my favorite question to ask is, what is your team using as your competitive differentiator? And you start to hear that answer be very boilerplate of, we are great in this industry, we have offices in this location. Those pieces, while important, are nothing compared to a story that you can tell of, we have a client like X that we did Y for, and that led to Z. And if you can tell that story at scale, and that's all hidden in the emails, all hidden in the text messages, the submissions, you can tell that at scale, you can start winning accounts in areas that, nobody else is differentiating right now.
And that's huge, because we did a recent podcast with Kim Henderson, and it was all about how do you differentiate yourself. And it was, it was great. Got a ton of traction, because I think that is the key. If you can really kind of come out on top, and using your data is key, because really like this digital dust can become digital gold for a lot of different people. So from like a leader perspective, when does a leader really need to realize like, hey, I need to do something with my data? Like, what are those key things that they should be looking at to realize we have dust, now let's turn it into gold? Like, what's those buying points or decision points?
Yeah, so one of the pieces that was really intriguing for us on our last onsite was with a professional staffing firm, and they're, mid-market size staffing firm. And we were asking some of the salespeople, how do you go find those stories that differentiate you, or even just find what has been done with this account in the past so that you know where to start and what to do. And the answer was so quick and off the top of his head that he goes to his leader, who's just been here for, longer than he has. And he asks, what have we done with this account, or what have we done with this type of company in this industry? And so I would say that, especially mid-market, if you guys have people that are coming to a central source of truth and asking a person for advice on how we've handled situations like this in the past, you would be surprised how much of that is well documented in your digital dust right now that can be can be excavated, can be used, and be a training tool for your new team. I would also say, like, one of the biggest indicators for us is we start to see healthcare really start to have their resurgence with, rec volume up right now. There's a lot of hiring classes coming in to a lot of these companies. So a lot of hiring of new recruiters. And when you look at the training for your hiring of new recruiters, how much of that is, specific insights that you guys have gleaned from these past relationships? Because if it starts to look and feel generic, there's probably, information that you can pass to these new recruits that you're getting onto the floor. In first week, they can have this, ride along buddy of, here's all the information that we've done for this type of thing in the past that you can go utilize for your own coaching. Instead of setting them chairside with your best recruiter in the office and hoping they learn through osmosis, if that's part of your process today, it's still a valuable, shadowing is still valuable. I get it, but you have the data to be able to shadow as well as the person at this point.
Yeah, your data just can help you drive that strategic planning and just get you further ahead from the very beginning, which is huge.
Yeah, how we've always had the super long ramp time, right?
Yeah.
For anybody that you're hiring on sales and recruiting. Why do all the knowledge that's out there that you have in your database, if you can start distilling that and having it ready at the right moments for those recruiters, those salespeople, the impact that can have is huge. And so that's when you ask where to start. I think it's pretty definitive that they all have the data. I'd say looking at those processes and seeing how much of that isn't curtailed to your specific knowledge and your specific brand and positioning in the market, that'll give you a quick indicator of, an opportunity for you there.
So let's talk about, because I feel like there's these opposing sort of factors, right? Like, obviously having data and having the access to the data allows you to obviously resource it very well and do a lot with it. But then you also have this very heavy AI hand in our industry right now too, that's like really pushing and promoting like a lot of, not automation, but using generative AI in order to like help your agents. Which I feel personally, as I look into our industry from the outside, like I feel like we are weakening our talent in many ways. Like, we're not training, like, as to what you just said, we're not using these technology resources to train our people. We're using them to supplement them in many ways. So how do you help people, or what recommendation do you have to like help people understand where to take technology to and where to then leverage your people from?
Lauren Jones uses this quote on a regular basis that I really like, which is AI is not going to replace you or beat you in a deal, but a recruiter who's using AI will. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is we as an industry are always, very big on this is a person-to-person business. For some reason, we now have jumped to some cohorts feel like we can just jump to let's automate an outreach that is completely AI driven, that doesn't have our human insights into it. And we can start to see kind of the AI slop, as they call it, in the market right now. You start to see where peppering people with, yes, they feel more personalized because it uses their name. It might use their title, but what it's missing is, what do I know about that person? What do I, what's my relationship been? What has their relationship been with our brand? Some of these brands have such, long-standing talent relationships, and to not acknowledge that in the outreach and to not acknowledge that in, anything that you're using with AI really becomes a hindrance instead of a help. And that's where, to your point, there's two different schools of thought you're starting to see, which is like, AI can do so much and do everything. Why don't we just let it do a whole bunch of stuff? And maybe we don't hire a bunch of these people that we thought we were going to hire.
Right.
And then there's the people that say, maybe we use it to give our team superpowers. And those superpowers are, you have a coach who's been here for as long as the brand has existed, who can just tell you the answers to the questions that you want to ask and point you in the right direction, to your point, whether that be predictive analytics or, coaching you on how to phrase a message because it knows that you've had success with messages like this in the past. Using it as a coach versus using it as a replace my job, I think that's a much more realistic expectation for where we're at in the market.
I couldn't agree more, because I think that also that just perspective of the coaching mentality. And if you have a coach that's sitting on top of your data, you are like differentiating yourself. You can do so many things. I know I got, Jeff, I got the opportunity to actually see a demo the other day of like what Mark's put together. And I was like blown away from the insights that it can help, like even going back and looking at data that we never thought about, that dust from like 6 months ago. And it's like, hey, remember you had a conversation with this person and they said, call me in like 5 months because I'll have some opportunities. It was amazing what the coach can do through Toro and actually remind the account manager, the account exec, the account manager, the manager, and say, hey, remember this conversation. So now it's a coach that's also having you do look backs. And I was just incredibly blown away because I think it's just phenomenal with what you guys are doing from driving that forward. Because coaching with the data that you can have just takes us to a different level. It takes us to a step up. I mean, you're going from like a community college to a D2 to now you're a D1. You're in like the Pac-10. So there, my sports analogy on that side.
Perfect, spot on.
We'll go all the way to, NFL, MLB, here we go. Let's bring it up. But Mark, from that coaching kind of theory as well, if someone is drowning, they don't know what, and someone listening out here is probably like, man, I'm not even at like college level. I'm probably in like junior high club ball going on here.
I'm just in a social league.
It's social. It's a beer league. We're in the beer league. How do I get out of this beer league? And that's not for the little kids. You got to be 21 and above for beer league here. But if they're drowning in beer right now, how do they get out of this? And where should they start? Like, what would help them get to, okay, I've got data. I need to like separate and have a good data strategy. I need a coach. Like, what would be that first start for them?
Yeah, I think that was a lot of what the last post I had was about. Is a big piece of this is adoption is all a product of how much friction there is in what you're asking your team to do as well. There's certainly a part of that is change management, and change management can overcome a lot of friction. But if you give a less friction based process to your team, they're going to start to utilize that if they're seeing value in it. And so to your question of, where do you start? Obviously, shameless plug here. One of the things that we always suggest for all of our clients is you start with the data analysis first, and we start to really peel back. Let's look at the data that you have that's not in a place where you use it today, and we can show you why you're not using it today, and what we could do to structure that data for you, what the impact of that could be. And that's something that we just do, with every customer as we're starting, any relationship with them. I think that starts to give them a lens of maybe here you match those up with what their, big goals are for the year. Starts to give them a little bit of a roadmap of like, here's where I want to focus. But the other piece is you just go out and look at how your team talks to each other on the floor. Because going back to the coach piece, they just pop over to somebody's desk and they just start asking questions of, hey, I saw your name on this account. I saw you worked with this candidate in the past. Give me your sizzle for why this candidate's good for a job. All of those questions are questions that they would want to ask your system if they could. And that's why, again, the biggest adoption piece that we've had is we've got our Talent IQ product, which kind of sits on top of the records in the ATS and starts to let them just ask questions of this massive amount of data that they have in the records. And I think that's the piece that we have been blown away by every time we roll that out, how quickly that's adopted by teams. And when we really, strip down why is that the case, it's because that's how they're talking to each other anyways. That's how they're asking for help anyways. And now they just get to ask a system that knows everything that there is to know about the candidate they're looking at, the company record, whatever the case is.
I mean, you're kind of giving them like their own homegrown wiki, right? Like this is, we're kind of going full circle back to the days of the intranet, right? But like you're doing it in such a way that like it lays over the top of good news, everybody entering things into the system that they're supposed to. So we have all of that collection of information on top of which you've got this technology resource that's sitting there that can digest that as a data set to then provide those answers. I think like phenomenal solution to have that in someone's world. So if they don't have access to something like that though, right? And they're really looking like internally, like what, I'm a bit of a DIY guy myself. Like I like to try to sort things out on my own. What are some assignments that we can actually give our listeners to try to figure out like what should they work on over the next like week or quarter, right? How can they sort of bucket their efforts a bit?
Yeah, I think that, one of the good DIY pulse checks is you start to figure out how much of your activity is your team going out external to the database. Because I think one of the big call outs that we've all been talking about in this industry for forever is, why does everybody start their search for a candidate on LinkedIn before they even look to see what's in the database? Why does everybody start their prospecting by doing a bunch of stuff on Google to find these companies and stuff versus, again, looking at what your historical has been? And when you find out that a decent percentage of that is they start external, I'd say the next step for them is to start figuring out what pieces of data are they going out and looking for? Why is it that they are doing this external search? And then start to peel back the onion in your own system of, okay, they're looking for this data point. Hopefully that data point's a field in my ATS. How many of my candidates that I think are useful, that we talk about, how many candidates do I have in my system? Cool. How many of those do you have the data point that your team is looking for? That field is filled out with a piece of data that they're typically going external because they trust LinkedIn to provide it to them quicker. If you start to peel that back and really understand what it is they're looking for and how many of your candidates don't have that data in the spot that they'd be looking for it at, that gives you a picture of, why the database utilization is what it is. And I think a lot of these ATSs too have good tooling around, how much time is spent in the ATS, how many candidate activities do you have in the ATS? Those pieces are all, again, good litmus tests for you to be able to run BI reports on and understand how much of this is happening external to my system, because everything that happens external to the system is a cost, an additional cost for you and your team, whether it be technology or time.
So would you say like in trying to sort of retool like the farming, right? Because that's really what we're talking about doing, is really farming out of your own ecosystem. So in that, would you recommend like pulling more reports first? Or would you recommend that little bit of an analog up front? Right? Because I worry sometimes that we kind of get caught up in our own BS, right? Where we're like, oh, well, this is the report that we always pull. And here's how we know that, Jeff is doing well or not doing, right? Which should they be starting with, analog or digital?
Yeah. So I like the analog first with the preface that you have to be asking specific questions to the team. Like you can obviously ask the overarching, what's tricky about your job? What do you think slows you down? I think the challenge is often, users will point to something that maybe is irritating for them, but isn't kind of root cause analysis, which is what you're actually trying to find. So you want to go into it with, into that analog conversation with some specific questions like what sources do you use to farm candidates if we're talking to a recruiter? Of those sources, what do you like about them? So phrase it as the positives to understand, again, what it is that they feel like they're getting by doing this other thing that isn't, internal into your system. And then take all of those pieces back. And that's kind of your data analysis or your data gathering, your BI blueprint that you want to go figure out now is these are the things that they're looking for. These are the things that they find valuable. How much of that do we have access to? And how much is our process driven to let them all know that we have access to that in our database? So, part of that's tech stack, and part of that is when we train them, when we're doing the learn through osmosis by putting them with the best recruiter, is everybody going external, and we just have no idea that there's a process break there that we can address.
Yeah, so process mapping.
Long way of me saying, yeah, I think you start analog, but you do the analog just to figure out where you're trying to find the digital.
Gotcha.
I think that's great. Yeah, having those conversations, what a great start. Seeing what they're missing, having the interviews with your top reps, and what are they missing? What are they seeing? Or what are people asking them if they're kind of in a player coach role and coming to their desk on a consistent basis?
I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the ones that everybody wants all of your recruiters to be like your best recruiter. Well, ask your best recruiter, what are people coming to you and asking you for help on?
Yeah. And if your best recruiter won the lottery tomorrow and they're gone, see, I like to make it positive. So if they won the lottery tomorrow, they're not getting hit by buses. They're winning lottery. Yeah. If they won the lottery, where would this person go? Where would they get that information? And so those are also the questions I always try and think about asking. So that's huge. I love this, Mark. So Mark, you've been here. You've been like, data has been probably you've been working through data for as long as I've known you, and it's a part of everything. But I got to ask you, like, through all the years, do you have, we always like to kind of find out, like, what's someone's story or what's their motivational quote that keeps them going along the lines? Do you have a quote or anything that you live by through and through that's like gets you through your day or week or year? We've all had some rough years.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do love a good quote. I love a good metaphor. So like one of the ones that's my mix of both of those, which is the story that I think a lot of people have always heard, is the technician that you pay $500,000 to, who comes in and looks at this giant $1 million machine and looks around, whips out his ball-teen hammer and hits it in one specific spot, and the machine comes to life. When he leaves, he gives the invoice for $40,000. The client says, well, $40,000 for 2 minutes of your time. How is that possible? So he corrects the invoice to say $38,000, $2,000 for swinging the hammer, and $38,000 for knowing where to swing the hammer.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing, is like, again, it's all about, we have this asset in front of us. Knowing how to use that asset is our prime opportunity for differentiation and providing value.
What a great metaphor and story to tell. Because, I mean, knowing where to swing the hammer is really the biggest differentiator that you can drive, and it gets you.
True.
So yeah, it just like keeps you going. I love this. This has been awesome. Mark, thank you first off for being on part of like Highly Adaptive, and seriously, all you do for this community. You connect with so many people. I absolutely love it. If people were trying to get a hold of you, what's the best place? Like, where can they go? Your website, LinkedIn? Are you going to be at different events coming up? Like, how can folks get a hold of you now?
LinkedIn, definitely. My email is really easy. It's mark.hummel@toroinsights.ai. And thank you for having me on. But also, I love this industry because it is this group of people that we keep learning together. And I always, use we when I talk about the industry, because we have all been working to elevate this industry for so long, and we can win all of these things together. And that's the type of stuff that I love talking about around the bar at like Healthcare Staffing Summit, which I'll be at here shortly, and then Exec Forum at the beginning of next year. All of this stuff with a good drink in hand at the bar is probably the most fun way to connect with me.
I love it. A bourbon in hand.
Yes, you know it. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh my God, this has been great. I mean, listen, if people want to get more advice from the source, they should definitely reach out to you, Mark. This has truly been a really insightful discussion about turning digital dust into that competitive gold. And thank everyone out there for like tuning in. Obviously, like we're doing this for not just because we don't have anything else to do with our time, but because we're hopefully bringing good information. But look, have a great rest of your week, and we will see everyone on the next episode. Mark, thank you so much.
Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Mark.
Big thanks to Allied Insight, not just our sponsor, but an industry leader and preferred marketing partner to staffing and consulting businesses nationwide. If your firm is looking for expert level support that goes beyond the logo, you know where to go, alliedinsight.com. If this episode helped you, share it with your friends and colleagues, and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, consider leaving us a review, and when you're ready for more industry insights, articles, case studies, and more, find it on allthingsstaffing.com. This episode was produced and edited by Allied Insight, and the music provided by Home Music Stock. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.